round 25 headlines. I'll just run through the matches. Raiders 16 to the Roosters 40. This is really disappointing from the Raiders, I thought. I tipped the Roosters, thought they were going to win, and thought they were going to maybe bounce back from a disappointing loss to the Rabbitohs, but I didn't expect them to beat the Raiders 24 points. I think it's just capped off a really, really poor season from the Raiders. I don't want to talk too much about the bottom 8 teams because I will be chatting a lot about them in the review part of the episode. But yeah, really disappointing from the Raiders. As Ricky Stewart said in the press conference, if they can't beat that injury-battered Roosters lineup, they're just not that good of a team and don't deserve to play finals. So yeah, that was really disappointing for Raiders. I'm glad they missed out on finals, though, not playing good footy at the moment. And the Roosters moved through, and they look, they're obviously not the side they were in the last 3 or 4 years due to injuries, but they still got the finals experience and the star power to challenge a couple teams. So that'll be interesting to see how they go. Then we moved into the Sharks versus the Storm. The Storm proved that even with a lot of players out, they can still get the job done. I think the rhetoric, that's a buzzword these days. But everyone was talking about the Sharks getting the W there and making finals. I never really bought into it. I think can't remember what the line was. It was very short. It might have been like 8 points. So in the end, it was only 12. So in people's defense, it wasn't far off. But yeah, I was confident the Storm were getting the job done here. And similarly to the Raiders, the Sharks, they've showed some flashes in the last 2 months, but just in general this season, I don't think they've deserved to make finals. To be honest, this year there's really only been 6 teams maybe deserving of a final spot, but I think normally the 8 teams all look like finals teams, but I think it's because this year the top 6 is so much better relative. These teams don't look like they deserve to make it, but yeah, the Sharkies missed out. And they sort of closed the book on a bit of a chapter this year, you'd have to say. John Morris going out, Sean Johnson going out, Woodsy leaving. And then they're opening a new chapter next year with like Nico Hines and stuff. But yeah, Storm roll on, look decent, have some injury issues though, which we'll discuss in the preview. Eels Panthers. Game of 2 halves, really. First half, Eels reserve side really put up a good fight. I thought Makatoa, the front row, was probably the standout. Ray Stone, I think he's a free agent at the end of the year. I think he's someone that a lot of clubs should look at. I think I would love to see the Tigers make a crack for him because he looks like someone who, every time he's on the park, he gives his all, and that's all you can really ask for of a forward. But then the Panthers just overpowered them in the second half. Got their mojo back a little bit. You'd have to say To'o, Luai, that left side's operating pretty well. And Panthers look dangerous going to finals. But yeah, not much to add. Obviously, it was the Eels' second 11. And we'll see if that move of resting those players will pay off. Broncos Knights. This was probably, I called this one. I tipped the Broncos. Really disappointing from the Knights. Look, they'll say they rested players. I know Adam O'Brien made that excuse, but I'm pretty sure they only rested like 2 players. I'm pretty sure it was like Jaden Brayley and maybe one of the Saifidi brothers, and I think the other Saifidi's injured. So yeah, they really only rested like 2 starters. Maybe Frizzell got rested or something. There were only a couple forwards pretty much. They still had the rest of their team, full back line, full spine, except for Brayley, obviously, but then they subbed off Ponga and Pearce at the 50-minute mark, I think, and that ultimately wouldn't have made an impact. In fact, they actually got better when Ponga and Pearce got off the ground. I'm really not sure what's going on with Kalen Ponga at the moment. I know these last couple of years are very difficult for everyone in the COVID times, and maybe that's playing a factor, but apart from maybe a couple Origin games where he's looked really good, and there's been a few good NRL games here or there, especially this season. He just has not looked like the Kalen Ponga of old. Maybe he's playing injured, but yeah, especially the last like 6 weeks, I would have to say, really poor from Kalen Ponga. And if the Knights are going to make any waves in finals, he's really, really got to step up. Piercy as well. It's an interesting one. They actually look better the more Clifford controls the team, in my opinion. I think Clifford's playing great footy at the moment. I think we saw when Piercy went off, Clifford took the reins and they looked like they had a lot more direction. I think they use Clifford a bit weirdly. They sort of they just use him as like a kick target half the time. But yeah, anyway, Adam O'Brien seems like he's not sure what he's doing, and we'll see how they go in finals. The next game, one of the best games of the season. This was absolutely awesome. Cowboys, Manly, both teams play attractive football, and the scoreboard suggests a Sea Eagles blowout, but don't let that fool you. There was about 3 tries in the last 5 minutes. I think the margin was only like 8 points with 6 minutes to go. So it was a pretty good effort from the Cowboys, even though they only won one game in their last like 10. I think they finished with some sort of momentum. Manly go into the finals humming. They weren't, over the last 2 weeks, they haven't looked themselves at times, but when they've needed to, they've flicked into gear and looked really, really dangerous. Obviously, Turbo probably scored individual try of the year and then scored team try of the year about 2 minutes later. That Ruben Garrick try was absolutely incredible. Probably the best try I've ever seen, honestly. But yeah, that Turbo try, that individual one, it's sort of been forgotten probably because of the Ruben try. But yeah, that had like 9 tackle busts in it or something. It was absolutely ridiculous. Vossi had a great call of both tries, made both of them all the more entertaining. And that was an awesome game, and that sort of led us into one of the most disappointing games. Rabbitohs Dragons. Rabbitohs sort of put up a second 11 or a second 13, and yeah, it just wasn't that interesting. I'll be honest, I didn't watch all of it. I did flick over to the AFL at one point, but yeah, the first half was pretty dull. Obviously, one of Chris Elias or whatever his name is scored a try. Braithen Astor commentating on the game when he's a player agent of the player really put me off the game because I just didn't want to listen to anything he had to say because it was obviously going to be biased. But yeah, the Peter Mamazuelos looks really, really good. That halfback Blake Taff looks decent at fullback as well. The Dragons fall back at the end, but yeah, when I was watching the game, they weren't really offering much at all, as they haven't really for the second half of the season in attack. And then Sunday, crazy day of football for a lot of reasons. Some not good, some very good. Titans Warriors. Now the Titans came out; they only needed to win by 12 points. I actually tipped that they would make the 8, which I think, looking back, is a pretty good tip. A lot of people thought the Sharkies had it in the bag, but yeah, they absolutely cruised to victory over the Warriors. But sort of the highlight of this game, I must say, was the punch-ons. Warriors really just erupted in the second half. Started with Matt Lodge losing his temper. A few little skits and scats, like there was one where Fafita was being held up, had his back exposed. Lodge came in so late and just whacked him in the back. Wasn't illegal, but it was just a bit of a dog shot. He did something else sort of similar to that. And then I think with 25 minutes to go, yeah, it all sort of just erupted. There was a few grabbings of the jumper, and then the thing that boiled it over is Philip Sammy went over to someone on the ground and like picked them up by the collar and sort of pushed them into the ground a bit, like they do a lot. And that just erupted. The Warriors were not having a bar of that. They came over and started pushing around. Jazz Tavanga decked someone, and then punches were thrown. Kane Evans threw a punch. Jared Wallace threw a punch, I believe. Matt Lodge might have thrown a punch as well. And yeah, it was funny at times, but I don't know. His apology on Instagram was a bit weird because Matt Lodge that I'm talking about, because he seems very sincere, but it's almost a little bit scary. Like it seems like he loses control of his actions, which is pretty frightening on and off the field, actually. So yeah, he's got a bit of a history. So I always feel a bit weird seeing him get aggressive on the field because it always spooks me out a bit. Debatable whether he should be in the competition, but I don't really want to talk about that today. But yeah, that was the highlight. And then the big fellow, the Titans fan, got the rig out celebrating tries, and then he was doing shoeies. That was also a highlight. But yeah, big win for the Titans. They show they've got some grunt, which they'll need to go on a bit of a run in this final series. And I actually think they're a dangerous team out of that bottom 4. Obviously, I'd probably rather play them than the likes of the Roosters and Parramatta, just because their floor or average performance is a lot worse than those two. But in terms of ceiling of what they can get to, I think the Titans are arguably the most dangerous team in that bottom four. We've seen them sort of push the Storm twice this year. And we saw them almost beat the Rabbitohs early on in the season. On their day, they can really turn it on. Unfortunately, their days are few and far between, but hopefully they're on song in September. Tigers, Bulldogs. Oh, look, I'm a Tigers fan. I'm sort of numb to it now. The first day, I was just, my whole family and I, we were just down in the dumps. It was one of the worst afternoons of football I've ever seen. And I know a lot of people like to clown on the Tigers, but surely, like I'll be honest, like surely there's some sympathy to be thrown out for Tigers fans. Like it's a very loyal fan base, and we've sort of stuck by this club for so long and not seen any success. And I know people like giving it back and forth. That's not really the way I roll. I like to support other people, but anyway. Yeah, it's a bit hard seeing all the pot shots from other fans and journalists, and you're also suffering from just supporting the team. But yeah, I don't know what the way forward. Congrats to the Bulldogs. Happy to see from a objective point of view. Happy to see a lot of their players go out on a win, like Will Hopewade and stuff. Nick Meaney going to the Storm as well. He played pretty well. But yeah, the Tigers were just awful. Looks like, like I'm not really making any revelations here, but it does look like this is the Tigers a lot of the time. I know they care because they do; it's their job. But it always looks like the Tigers don't care, and that's maybe there's maybe about 3 or 4 games a season where that's exempt, but for the most part in this game, perfect example, yeah, it just looks like they don't care that much. And as I said, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do because they're competitive sportsmen and that's what they do. But yeah, it's hard to believe that at times. Obviously, Dewey and Laurie being injured, not helpful, but yeah, you can't lose to the Wooden Spooners 38-0. That's disgraceful. Before this game, I was strongly on the team of keeping Maguire. I did sort of think that if we lost this game, my opinion might change. And look, I'll be honest, right now I'm unsure because the way I see it is I don't think the coach matters next year. I think next year is going to be a very, very tough season for whoever it is. We've obviously got Tim Sheens coming back as a bit of a director of football, which I think will have only positive impacts on the club, and it's also good to hear that we're in a good financial position. But in terms of the coaching position, I think it's really hard to make the call because Madge has not done well. You can't sugarcoat that. There's not really been any progression, and the roadmap out of this mess is still very unclear. But my issue is I don't know if there's that many other better options. For example, as I said, I don't think the coach matters next year. I think it's going to be a tough year no matter what. But what you've got to now think about is when you've finished, like let's say next year's the dip and we start going up from there. You want to think about who's that coach you want when you're bouncing up and which coaches have player pool. And yeah, I just don't know enough about the coaches in the available selection pool to really make that call. It's hard to know when you don't see behind the scenes. I'd say Michael Maguire is the biggest name that's available. There's maybe Shane Flanagan, but to me, that's not an inspiring coaching change if we bring in Shane Flanagan. And yeah, I don't know. It's really hard. Let me know in the comments what you think the Tigers should do. I'm really 50-50 on it. In a normal situation, I'd say Madge doesn't deserve another chance. But my issue is that, A, he's had a lot of shit to deal with salary cap. Like, there's been a lot of players on more than they should. So he's sort of working with a team that's maybe 80% of what other squads are. But yeah, there's not really been much player progression under his coaching, which worries me. But the issue is, who are the better options out there? And I'm really not sure if there's too many available. So yeah, let me know what the Tigers should do. I know the knee-jerk thing is to sack Madge, but that's sort of been our way of doing business in the last 6-7 years. And so I think we've really, really got to think about this one because it could have big consequences on the club. moving forward. And yeah, it's just really sad. In terms of personnel, Cheekham and BJ Leilua are both been released, let go. Uh, I'll be honest, Cheekham's not a bad player, but like it's not a big loss. I'm sure he'll go be a decent player somewhere else. BJ Leilua, I think that's a fair loss. That definitely wasn't a great signing. And obviously the headlines are all about Luke Brooks. I don't know, it's a tough one because he's got one more year left on the contract, so I don't really know if it's worth shipping him off and then having to pay his contract. Um, Unless it's against his will, but I would sort of rather just have him, even if he's just coming off the bench or something. Like, he's not the worst club player, but he's obviously, as we've seen, not the halfback who's going to lead us to glory. So, for me, what I would do is I would give Jackson Hastings the keys to the castle, play Dewey at 6, and maybe just have Brooks as a backup. But, yeah, if someone comes and offers to take Brooks off our hands and pay, 80-90% of the salary, I would be more than happy to let him go. Because at this point, it's not even for the club. I would also like to see him go somewhere else because I think he can be a good player. But unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen at the Tigers anytime soon. And he's getting on in age. Like, he doesn't want to hang around at the Tigers for 3 more years, get more abuse. I think he's better off going to somewhere that's better set up for him, and I think he'll be fine. But yeah, it's just really hard at the moment. We can't draw big players in. We've got a lot of cap space, but that doesn't seem to be helping our cause. And what will probably end up happening, we'll sack the coach. We'll go splash 1.1 million on a 7 out of 10 player, and we'll be stuck in this mess forever. But yeah, hopefully there's a way out of it because it's pretty hard right now as a Tigers fan. I did a bit of content on transfers earlier on in the season, so I thought I'd just give a little update. I haven't really mentioned any of them recently since I think Mbai, but yeah, just a little update. Won't be long, but Booth has gone to the Titans, the Melbourne third string hooker. That'll be an interesting one. He might start there. I don't think Mitch Rain or Aaron Clark are the best of players, so that'd be an interesting maneuver because we don't really know what to expect there. Adam Clune's gone to the Knights, which is really interesting. Not a young man at all, so not really one for the future. I think they've probably brought him in as a backup to Mitchell Pearce, sort of like why they brought in Blake Green, but unfortunately injuries didn't allow him to be that serviceable backup. Pearcey obviously pretty injury prone at the moment, so I think Clune's a serviceable backup, and I really like Adam Clune. I think he's a good player. Curtis Siren's gone to St. Helens. Obviously struggling to get into that Manly team at the moment, and I think he's got a bit of good footy left. I think he would be a really good back rower over for St. Helens. They love an Australian back rower. They have Joel Thompson and Sione Matalia at the moment. And Jordan Pereira has, just as of this morning, gone to the Broncos, which I think is pretty interesting. Probably suggests that Osako doesn't have much of a future at the club, which is interesting. But yeah, so you'd think that Oates and Pereira will be the wingers going into next year, but I'm not sure how that will go because Brisbane's squad is sort of having a bit of an overhaul at the moment. Just quickly before we get into the power rankings and the bottom 8 season review, I thought I'd touch on the Super League. Been really into the Super League at the moment, been watching a lot of it. And this weekend was Magic Weekend. And if you have access to KO, anything, highlights, YouTube, I don't know where it is, please go watch Catalan versus St. Helens and watch the last 5 minutes. You don't even have to watch the last 10 minutes. It was 1 versus 2, featuring a lot of former NRL stars, Sione Matalia, James Maloney, Sam Tonkins, and Sam Cassiano. And so if you want to go watch it, feel free to go watch it because trust me, it's the greatest 5 minutes of football I've ever witnessed. So go watch that. But I'm going to spoil it. Catalan scored 3 tries in 5 minutes to come back. It's absolutely ridiculous. They look down and out. The commentators were even talking about like how the win and the loss affects them on the table. And then James Maloney sealed it in Golden Point with a 42-meter drop kick. It's honestly one of the best comebacks. It is full stop the best comeback victory I've ever witnessed. So it was absolutely incredible. It was a very dry game, like very forwards just bashing each other. It wasn't expansive football, but yeah, that was a great game. And then the following game, Leeds Hull FC went to Golden Point as well, and then the game I watched yesterday, Warrington-Wigan. Warrington got the chocolates. They look like they're going to be an interesting team. George Williams and Gareth Widdop in the halves make a bit of a dynamic duo. They got the job done over Wigan, who are really out of sorts at the moment. They can't score a point, which is exciting for the Tigers because Jackson Hastings and Gildart are coming from Wigan and they can't score points. But anyway, enough about the Tigers. But yeah, I'll probably be providing just little Super League updates. I might even do a finals preview episode because finals are in 2 weeks. So yeah, watch out for that. But yeah, I recommend to any Australian Rugby League fan who has KO, go watch it. Don't have to watch every game, but just keep in mind finals are on soon, and especially before daylight saving. It's actually not on that late. Like some games are at midnight. I usually just watch it when I wake up in the morning, and it's really good to watch. They do a really good job of covering the game over there. And then the power rankings. I don't know if there's any changes to my power rankings last week. So these are sort of who's the best team right now, in my opinion. I've got the Storm number 1. I saw Jamie Soward had the Panthers at number 1. I still think the Storm just I have more confidence in the Storm being able to produce on the big stage. I think the Storm, Panthers, and Seagulls are the clear top 3, and then I think the Rabbitohs are sort of a wild card, who I don't think they're of that ilk, but they might be. I don't think they are though. But yeah, the Storm for me, out of those 3, they're the most tried and tested. I know there's injury concerns right now, but I don't really buy into those games with the Melbourne Storm. And I just think whatever happens, even if they lose this week, I think they're going to be there on the final day in September, or it might actually be October this year. And I think they're going to be very, very hard to beat. Number 2, I've got the Panthers, probably the most informed team right now. As I mentioned before, have not got it done before. So that's why I've got them in second. But if we look at the last 3 rounds and each team's performance, they've probably had the most complete performances. They look like they're playing really, really good football. Manly, their defense is not as good as the top 2 teams, but they have the ability to score points and score a shit ton. So they're going to be a very dangerous team. I think Storm Seagulls could be a game for the ages if it's played in the right way. Rabbitohs in at 4, as I mentioned, with Latrell out and sort of their team getting rested on the weekend. They're sort of a bit of an unknown quantity. They haven't had much success against the big teams, but they've looked dangerous at different periods of this year. So they're a bit of a wild card for me. I don't think they win in round 1. I think it will be really tough for them to make it from there, but you never can ride out a Wayne Bennett team. Sydney Roosters in at number 5, a lot of injuries, but as I mentioned with the Storm, they've got the job done before. They've got experience, big match experience, and I think when you've got a team with James Tedesco in it, that's enough to sort of scare an opposition into maybe not playing the brand of footy they like. Parramatta, despite their shock win over the Storm, I still haven't seen enough of them to consider them a real contender, and I've got them down at 6th. I've got the Titans above the Knights, actually. I just think the Titans on their day are more likely to beat a big team than the Knights. I just don't think the Knights have the points in them to beat a good team at the moment. And yeah, their defense doesn't make up for that. So
it's a miracle! Oh yeah! What about that one? Unbelievable! Balotelli, Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle.